Time now for the school report. Today we welcome Mike Beighley to the studio, the superintendent of the Whitehall School District, brought to you by Poppy Bus Service. The school report starts right now.
That's right, everybody. It's Friday, and I am joined today by Mr. Beighley from Whitehall School District. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. How are you today?
Not too bad. It's Friday. You got to be good, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's a beautiful morning here. The sun's coming out. That fog is dissipated, and I think that smoke it's kind of gone now.
For now.
For now. Yeah, it'll be back. Like I was talking before, we need a tax on Canada for their smoke.
Exactly.
So we might as well jump right into it. It's the state budget update, and a lot of people have had a lot of things to say about this. So
yeah, it's an interesting time. I think when I was here in June, we kind of had an idea, although we didn't realize how fast it would go. I think we had an idea of what was potentially coming. In a lot of emotional reactions right now, I think, but part of our job as school superintendents, along with a lot of other leaders in the state, is we have to sort through the emotion. We have to get past it. We have to start figuring out what this really means. And just kind of like I was afraid of, I think the reality is we're going to see some property tax spikes. And hopefully, if our folks follow through on what they said, you should see other reductions, although that remains to be seen, and I don't know that I believe that that's actually what's going to come. But basically what happened is they allowed us to collect or use $325 a kid for each of the next 2 years. So for us, that's about $240,000 in new revenue. Mm-hmm. The real problem is that's about a 2.8% increase. Okay. So that's the main source of our overall operating revenue. Mm-hmm. So 2.8, when inflation is at 3 or a little higher, we're losing ground every day. Yeah. And on top of that, now they opted to not provide equalization aid to offset the levy. So we're going to see tax spikes. Mm-hmm. And the sad part is you get the political games, right? You get some of our area legislators, I wouldn't necessarily say our specific ones, saying, well, you're not required to levy this. Well, yeah, we aren't, except we can't operate then.
Yeah, you can't operate at the same level that you've been operating, and that's the last thing you want to be doing is losing that ground.
When we're losing ground to inflation anyway. Yeah. So I think that's that perspective. So I think as long as we understand that early and we start talking about it, mm-hmm. Undoubtedly at some time in December I'm going to start getting calls from folks wanting to know why we did this. So I think now we're just going to start talking about it up front. Yeah, I think and there's a lot of talk around special education. Mm-hmm. Those types of scenarios. We did see some increases in that funding coming from the state. Obviously we have a growing set of costs related to serving our kids with the highest needs, and so that'll help some. It's not what they had requested, although I don't know that the request was able to be funded. Let's put it that way. Doesn't mean it wasn't a real need. Maybe the most intriguing thing, other than the sad fact that we're going to raise taxes, is the open enrollment funding amount changes. Mm-hmm. For students who come to non-resident districts, that number has gone up now for next year about $1,150 a kid. That's a significant increase.
Okay.
So if you're a net winner like our district is, we have more kids coming in than kids leaving.
Okay.
That's a bump for us. It goes up another, $900 or so in the following year. The weird part, though, is it's still less than what a voucher is worth.
Okay.
So having kids move between schools from a public education perspective is worth less than those that are leaving public schools to go to a voucher school. That's something that our folks need to really be aware of. Mm-hmm. Again, take all the judgment out. It's not an issue of a voucher school versus a public school, etc. Certainly, I have my perspective. Other folks have their perspectives, and that's okay. I think the simple reality, though, is if you're going to move, shouldn't it be worth the same amount of money?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting question that some folks need to come up with some answers for. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got some real structural changes coming too.
Well, as you know, and I think as everybody around here knows, we're certainly pushing the limits to try to figure out what that looks like. We've moved into the personalized learning, and already even specific this summer, we've gotten into this concept of device time or screen time, right? A high-level conversation around how much time should kids spend on screens. I read something the other day that was pretty interesting, though, is we really have to draw a line between what we consider device time versus social media time.
Yeah, it's two different things.
Two very different things, and in two very different sets of outcomes. No different than what I'm looking at with you right now. You've got screens and computers all over this, electronic pieces all over the place. What really, though, we have to start paying attention to is social media. You have a lot of these conversations taking place. Should we ban phones in school, right?
Yep.
And I think I've always come from the perspective, it's not the phone. We have behavioral issues that we need to address and work on in terms of responsibility, those types of things, little self-discipline to be able to put something in your pocket and leave it there.
Yep.
But oftentimes that reverts back to a conversation, or we never get to the conversation of the real one, which is this whole like, share, retweet world that we live in, where folks' self-worth comes from what they can put out on social media and how people react to it.
Yeah.
The Instagram concept, right? That's the problem. It's not necessarily a device.
Yep.
I mean, we can talk about the blue light and all that kind of stuff, right? All things we can rectify.
Yeah.
Our glasses filter out light now. We can put filters on screens. We can do all kinds of things like that. But I do think we have to quickly move beyond this concept of what we're really talking about.
Yeah.
Or to what we're really talking about, which is we're going to spend our lives going forward looking at screens.
Yep.
Okay.
There's no stopping it.
But if we leverage those things to interact with people, we don't want to lose that. And I think that's a lot of our structural change, right? Is we're trying to figure out how we blend this technology into unleashing its power, but not lose sight of that human piece. But I do want folks to understand there is a dramatic difference between using a device for educational purposes and using it for social media.
Yeah.
We need to be really, really intentional about that conversation.
Yep. Yeah, because it can be a very helpful learning tool for people. But also you got the flip side of that, these people scrolling on TikTok and they say these 30-second reels are really what's kind of wrecking kids because they get such a short attention span because all they get is 30 seconds of information and they're on to the next one. And
it rewires their brains, right? Yeah. And at the same time, we're not going to change this. This is the world that we're going to live in. So I think from an educational leadership perspective and what this area is kind of stepping forward with is to say, let's figure it out then. Okay, we can sit and pretend that this isn't going to happen. Okay, we were watching a show the other day, reverting back to when cars started to be taking over transportation away from horses, and the rhetoric around, this is going to ruin the world, and it's going to impact the world.
Yep.
Dramatically, right? We knew that. You can argue whether it ruined it or not based on your own perspective. We're at something of that magnitude, if not more, with this whole movement into artificial intelligence, the emerging technology concepts. So,
yeah. Well, like I was having this discussion with my wife the other day about AI, and what it's going to do for us is we're able to get some of the work we used to do, which would take us hours to do. AI can be a tool to help us with some of those work things, but it's going to be expected of people. Like that quickness of getting things done is going to be accepted. And if people just say, like, I'm not going to have nothing to do with this AI, I'm going to sit back, just like my dad used to be like, I'm never going to get a computer. Well, then you fall by the wayside.
Yeah. And we don't have that luxury. Okay,
No.
When you talked to a young person the other day, I basically said, I think AI is just kind of going to go away. And one of the other young people we were with was like, what are you, nuts? No, this is huge in terms of magnitude, right? Yeah. And arguably the biggest transitional change we have seen in our lifetimes. Okay, most of us that are living didn't live through World War II. We didn't live through the Great Depression. We didn't live through the famines in the 1800s. And we've lived through a pandemic, but we didn't live through a pandemic like they had then.
Yeah.
Right? So this is huge. And we're going to have to be an eyes wide open approach to this, which means we have to challenge everything we've ever done. Not from a judgment perspective, but from an evaluation perspective.
Yeah.
Do we need to keep doing it? Should we keep doing it?
Yep. It's a changing world. You change with the world.
And as we've seen already, with when we engage kids with the right tool, their educational process takes on a whole different exponential growth. You know, there's a lot of chatter around 10x growth, right? 10 times growth.
Yep.
We saw it when we got out of the kids' way. You know, so I think that's a whole nother challenge that probably we should get into at a different conversation. But this concept of adult limits based on our own comfort versus the kids in the world that they're going to live in. So
and I think this is a good place to move into how important that emergent tech is actually for the kids. So
it really is, you know, that, and it's going to change the workforce. It's going to change expectations, you know, again, but we can also have some limits on that, right? We can, you know, again, going back to the whole phone conversation, right? Should a kid have their phone in school? Probably you don't need it, especially for us. We have devices for our kids. We don't need to have the phone, okay? If the legislature steps forward and they do some kind of a ban, that's all fine and good, except it's superficial. It's not the real conversation, right? How do we teach kids to leverage emerging technology? Okay? We have a ton of adults addicted to social media.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You can't go anywhere. You drive on the interstate. Literally, I counted 5 of them the other day on a trip to the cities. 5 people who were so engrossed in their phone. They're weaving back and forth, and, you know, and these aren't school kids.
No.
Right? And if I'm not mistaken, that's also prohibited by laws in most states, right? But that doesn't really change anything. So that's, I think, part of this whole concept of how we can leverage the emerging technology to get back to also working with kids on ethics, morals, values, you know, empathy, the ability to communicate, the ability to self-discipline and regulate, you know, those types of things. If we can leverage the technology to free that stuff up, then I think we're in pretty good shape. But you're right, we can't ignore it.
It's coming, it's changing. It's a world of change, and you know, these kids need to learn faster and harder.
Well, I think, and even the hardest piece of this is, you know, from a school perspective. Schools, everybody knows, and sometimes to our detriment, we move really slowly. Right? Some of that is budgetary, right? We are afraid to jump in. We get held to a different degree of accountability. We're spending everyone else's money, right? Which most of us take that on with a responsibility factor that far exceeds our own money. Let's put it that way. But I think, you know, this time that we're getting into, we're going to have to abandon some things that we have been committed to for a long time because they simply aren't necessary anymore, or they aren't applicable anymore. That's really going to be hard on people, you know. And then I think we talked earlier, we're talking 8 generations coexisting now, right? So 8 different perspectives. That's going to be difficult to navigate. So I think all of those things are why we have to engage. We have to deal with this transition, and we can't pretend that it won't impact our lives going forward.
Exactly. And you've been doing construction going on, or
no construction. Our construction program.
Okay, that's what that's like.
Okay. We talked about this last month a little bit, but just a reminder that we certainly aren't moving away. In fact, we're actually looking to improve it. We're moving our construction program
down to Blair Taylor
as part of our co-op. You know, I think one of the things we have set out to do, the 4 of us, as well as our leadership teams, is best use the space inside all of our co-op spaces, right? This is not a Whitehall thing. You know what I mean? This is, how do we work together to figure out what we need to do? You know, and that's even more challenging in today's world. Go back to the open enrollment I just talked about, right? So one of the ways we can solve budgetary issues is to compete via open enrollment. It's not good for a region. It's not good for a state necessarily. You know, it is the market. So I think if we ever have to go there, we will. But that's not the goal. The goal is how do we best serve the entire group of kids in our region? So we were able to leverage Lynn and I talked about it. We looked at it, look at the space scenarios. How do we best do this? How do we maximize capacity of our staff members? You know, and get them in their areas of strength. So our construction program will be housed now down there. Drew Anderson will spend his day down there, but in a cool perspective, he remains one of our Whitehall teachers.
Yeah, well, and like we talked last time too, it's like you could come up with this idea and just say we're going to keep this in Whitehall. You build a $1 million building and stuff, or you work with another school around the area and you get it going right away, and you get the kids what they need, because construction, we need more people in construction, welding, all of those things.
We absolutely do, but you also go back to that conversation we had about around emerging tech. We needed the space.
Yeah.
We're bringing a third full-time person over to our emerging technology lab, right? So you start looking at, well, the best use of that space. Arguably, we're talking about something no one else in the country has.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, also we can leverage, and it shows what we're trying to accomplish with all of these other challenges and all of these other, often, in my opinion, superficial reactions to things, right? Our elected officials, when I say elected, that becomes their priority, right? Not necessarily doing what's right.
Yeah.
We don't have that luxury.
Yep.
We don't have that luxury to remain popular, right? It would be easy. It feels good, just like it does on social media.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to do some things. We're going to have to say some things. We're going to have to change some things that are going to irritate some people.
Yep. Hey, that's the way to be, though.
Exactly.
If you're going to move, you're always going to get a little pushback when you're trying to do the right thing, and then in the end, people usually figure it out that okay. Yeah, maybe it was the right thing, or they stay stubborn.
Well, but you're right. But even that acknowledgement, what a powerful step forward would be if we would just understand folks are operating from a perspective of trying to do the right thing and stop shredding them.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece of this, and I watch it happen to all the time to young teachers who are aggressive, or young entrepreneurs who are aggressive, and the world shreds them before they ever get a chance to do it. It's one thing for us as leaders, we've known that getting into it. I've been doing this a long time. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge the fact that if we're going to have things move forward, we're going to remain viable in a global environment as a country, we're going to have to change some things. And we're going to have to change them much faster than anybody ever wants us to. So.
Yep, exactly. And we got this other update, number 3 on your list. I know did we talk about this?
Liftoffs a little bit.
Liftoffs,
We have. That's our personalized learning moving forward, but it kind of all centers back, Brian. It's all about structural change.
Yep.
Right? It's not just sticking a new tool into the existing system. It's what systems need to change, right? And what started with 3 or 4 of us last year has morphed into, I think 18 districts from across the state are jumping in. More and more every day, more and more contacts every day. We have a big retreat coming up next Monday and Tuesday. 100 plus staff members from each of these schools getting together in the summertime to really talk about things that we need to do and how we need to do it and how do we best serve our kids for the world they're going to live in. That's really the challenge. So,
and that's the nice thing about that is you are bringing so many minds together, and you can kind of just compare notes.
Well, compare notes, and also it goes back to this challenge thing, right? We have to really dig in and figure out what this is going to look like. How do we identify? I was at an event last week at Titletown Tech, which I wasn't even necessarily all that familiar with until I got invited to the event. But it's a venture capitalist scenario funded by the Packers and Microsoft is where it started.
Yep.
Now there are a ton of highly successful employers that are part of that. But we got together for an afternoon, saw some technology around AI that one of our partners in the Czech lab, Lab Midwest, put together. You start talking about impact, so this is pretty cool, is that whole system, which is being now touted as an industry leader in AI instruction, came out of what is in our tech lab.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? That's
cool.
That's the scenario, and again, they were one of our partners, so that makes sense, but that event was all about small and large-scale businesses adopting AI and finding the efficiencies, but finding the new approaches. I think, and we're right on the cusp of that too. So I think that whole difficult piece of redefining skill sets, we have to take a look at kids, right? And then it brings up standardized testing. One of my good friends the other day brought that up again. Well, how else do we standardize? How do we measure? How do we And I don't think anybody's afraid of measurement. I'm certainly not.
Yeah.
As long as we're measuring things that matter, right? If they matter going forward, we need creativity. We need problem solving.
Yeah.
That's not what gets measured on today's educational assessments.
Yep.
The ability to memorize something gets measured, or to regurgitate it long enough to pass a test. That's it's not necessary. I'm not going to say it's has no value going forward, but its value is much more limited than it was.
Yeah.
So,
because some of those kids with that engineering mind that are good at problem solving might not be good at, remembering all the information, retaining that,
well, they don't see any value in it.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
So if they're bored, a lot of times they just don't want to put in the... I was one of those kids.
Yeah. Again, it's been often referred, we don't have a performance problem. We don't have an attendance issue. We have an engagement issue. Mm-hmm. In what our kids have become very, very good consumers of is things that matter to them.
Yep.
Okay? And we need to, as adults, make sure that we are providing the correct things that matter to them, but meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it. We don't carve into stone tablets with a hammer and chisel anymore, right?
Yep.
It's not what we do for homework, right? We need to leverage all of the things that are out there and all of the things that are being developed to really best serve those kids going forward. And how else do we remain self-sufficient? How do we become competitive, remain competitive, whatever your perspective is in a global environment? So that's what we're after.
Yep, exactly. Was there anything else you want to cover before we get going today?
Not really, other than, we have some cool events coming. August 27th will be our back to school day, I think, and that'll include an open house at our emerging technology lab.
Okay.
So we're hoping to get more folks into there and see what we really are doing, because it is an absolute game changer. But our regular back to school event with school pictures and all those things, and we go forward. Yeah. So we're excited about times when kids start coming back. I know everybody has some apprehension sometimes around that, and everybody really doesn't want to do it. For us as educators, that's what we do. So
yep.
Better for me to not have an empty building.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Mike, for being here. We've been talking with Mike Beighley from Whitehall School District. We're going to get back in the music right after this short break.
Get ready for all the fun at summer's main attraction, the Buffalo County Fair, in affiliation with Pepin County. It all starts Thursday.